The cameras rolled, the bright lights beaming down onto the glossy stage as the host, a well-known liberal commentator, leaned forward with a smirk. His guest list for the evening had been filled with political analysts, legal experts, and authors, eager to dissect the latest controversy surrounding former President Donald Trump. But no one, not even the audience, was prepared for the moment that was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said dramatically, holding up a stack of papers, "we have something tonight that will shake the very foundation of the Trump empire. And I'm not just saying that for effect." A murmur spread through the audience, a mix of anticipation and disbelief. The network had promoted this segment heavily, teasing that an explosive revelation was coming. Speculation had been rampant all day, with social media buzzing about what might be revealed. On the other side of the country, inside Mar-a-Lago, Melania Trump sat on a luxurious white sofa, her phone balanced in her hand. She had been scrolling through news updates, already irritated by the continuous media coverage of her husband's legal battles and controversies. When an aide rushed into the room, pale-faced and breathless, she looked up with an expression of mild annoyance. "You need to see this," the aide stammered, holding out an iPad streaming the live broadcast. Melania's eyes narrowed as she turned her attention to the screen. The host had just brought out a high-profile guest, a former insider from the Trump organization. The audience erupted into whispers and gasps as the man settled into his chair, looking both nervous and determined. "I was there," the guest began, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of someone about to unload a heavy burden. "I saw what happened behind closed doors, and I can't stay silent anymore." Melania's grip tightened on her phone. She had heard this kind of rhetoric before. People always claimed to have the real story, to have been there when it mattered. Most of them were either disgruntled former employees, eager for their 15 minutes of fame, or opportunists looking to sell a book. But something in the man's voice made her uneasy. The host leaned forward, nodding for him to continue. "You're saying you personally witnessed?" "Yes." The man took a deep breath. "And I have proof." The words sent a shockwave through the studio. The live audience gasped, some leaning forward in their seats as if trying to get closer to the revelation. Melania's heart pounded. She glanced at the aide, whose face was unreadable. The screen now displayed a large folder being pulled from under the desk. "Emails," the guest explained. "Internal memos. Conversations recorded with legal consent in a state that allows it. It's all here." The host lifted an eyebrow, clearly savoring the moment. "And what exactly do these documents prove?" The guest hesitated for a second, then set his jaw. "That Donald Trump knowingly engaged in—" Melania shot up from her seat, eyes blazing. She didn't need to hear the rest. This wasn't just another baseless accusation. This was someone who had prepared, someone who had evidence. She grabbed her phone, dialing frantically. A voice answered on the other end, tense and expecting the call. "Shut it down," she ordered. "Now!" Back in the studio, the host was reveling in the moment. "This," he declared, holding up one of the documents, "is undeniable proof that Trump—" Suddenly the screen cut to black. Gasps filled the studio as technicians scrambled to restore the feed. The network's control room was in chaos, producers shouting over each other. Melania let out a slow breath. It wasn't over, but she had bought them some time. Her phone buzzed again, another aide updating her. "They're trying to get back on air." Melania's lips pressed into a thin line. "Not if I can help it." Back in the studio, the technical difficulties stretched on longer than expected. The audience murmured, shifting in their seats as the host fumbled with his earpiece, listening to frantic producers in his ear. "We apologize for the interruption," he said, forcing a smile. "Seems like someone doesn't want this information getting out." That remark sent the crowd into an uproar. Some booed, others cheered, but all eyes remained glued to the screen as the network tried to recover. In Mar-a-Lago, Melania paced across the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She turned to her aide. "What else do we know about this man?" The aide tapped quickly on a tablet. He worked for the Trump organization for 5 years, left under difficult circumstances. He's been on a few networks before, but nothing this big. Melania clenched her jaw. She knew how these things worked. A disgruntled employee trying to take down Trump. It wasn't new. But the timing, the confidence, the so-called proof, that was what concerned her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a familiar number. "They're back on air," the voice on the other end reported. "It's worse than we thought." Melania didn't respond. She simply turned back to the screen, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest of the couch. The broadcast flickered back, and the host was livid. "Folks, I don't know what just happened," he began, glaring at the camera. "But we are not backing down. In fact, let's cut to the chase." He turned to his guest. "Tell them exactly what you just told me." The former Trump employee straightened his tie, clearly shaken by the interruption, but determined. "I have direct evidence that Donald Trump engaged in financial misconduct at the highest levels. I'm talking about falsified reports, hidden accounts, and—" Melania's phone rang before she could hear the rest. It was a private number. She hesitated, then answered. "What do you want?" she snapped. A deep voice responded, calm but firm. "This is only the beginning. You can't silence the truth." Her breath caught in her throat. She recognized that voice. It wasn't the guest. It was someone much closer to the situation, someone she hadn't expected to betray them. Before she could respond, the line went dead. Her hand trembled as she lowered the phone. This wasn't just another attack. This was personal, and Melania Trump was not about to let it slide. She turned to her aide, her voice cold and unwavering. "Find out everything. I want names. I want contacts. I want leverage." The aide nodded, already typing. Melania took a deep breath and turned back to the screen. The host was still going, feeding off the energy of the crowd, but he had no idea what was coming next. Melania's eyes burned with fury as she watched the liberal host revel in his so-called exposé. He thought he had won. He thought he had exposed Donald Trump in a way that couldn't be undone, but he had underestimated her. The aide returned, within minutes, holding a tablet out to Melania. "We have something." Melania took the device, scrolling through the information quickly. Her expression remained unreadable, but inside she felt a surge of satisfaction. The so-called whistleblower wasn't as clean as he pretended to be. The former Trump employee had a history of financial troubles, debts, failed businesses, and even a questionable real estate deal that had landed him under federal investigation years ago. He had managed to keep it quiet, but now it was a weapon in Melania's hands. She wasted no time. Dialing a number from memory, she waited as the call connected. "I need this on every major platform within the hour," she ordered. "I want reporters digging into his past, not my husband's. Make sure they find everything." A pause. Then a voice on the other end replied, "Consider it done." Back in the studio, the liberal host had no idea what was coming. "Now," he said dramatically, holding up another document, "this proves beyond a doubt that Trump manipulated his—" Words were interrupted by a loud beep in his earpiece. His face twitched in irritation as he listened to an urgent message from his producers. At the same moment, gasps spread through the audience. People were pulling out their phones, scrolling furiously. The murmurs turned into full-blown conversations. The yacht. Host frowned. "What's going on?" His guest shifted uneasily in his chair, his confidence faltering. The cameras cut to the giant screen behind them, where a breaking news alert had just appeared. Whistleblowers' shocking past. Revealed financial crimes, fraud allegations surface. The host's face paled. His guest looked like he had just been hit with a ton of bricks. Melania allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The tables had turned. The audience, once captivated by the so-called Trump scandal, was now whispering about the credibility of the man making the accusations. The guest shook his head in disbelief. "This is a smear campaign. They're trying to discredit me because I have the truth." The host scrambled to regain control of the narrative. Folks, let's stay focused on the real issue here. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The broadcast, which had started as a takedown of Donald Trump, had now turned into a spectacle of its own, a scandal within a scandal. And Melania wasn't finished yet. She turned to her aide. Now let's go after the host. The aide nodded and began making calls. This wasn't just about defending Trump. This was about making sure no one dared cross Melania Trump again. The liberal host, still reeling from the sudden shift in the narrative, struggled to maintain his composure. He was known for being sharp, aggressive, and always in control of his show. But right now, control was slipping through his fingers, like sand. Okay, let's take a step back, he said, forcing a grin as he turned back to his guest. I'm sure there's an explanation for this. These accusations against you. They're a distraction, the guest interjected, his voice cracking with desperation. They don't change the facts about Trump. The audience, however, wasn't buying it. The energy in the room had shifted. Murmurs of doubt rippled through the crowd. People glanced at their phones, seeing article after article exposing the so-called whistleblowers' shady past. Some of the audience members were even shaking their heads. The host had promised them an explosive takedown of Donald Trump. Instead, it was his own guest who was being taken down in real time. And then, as if the situation couldn't get any worse for them, a new alert popped up on the screen behind them. Breaking, liberal hosts passed anti-Trump reports, now under scrutiny. The host blinked rapidly, his throat going dry. What the hell is this? He muttered under his breath, tugging at his earpiece. The producers in his ear were scrambling. We're trying to verify, but multiple outlets are picking it up. Looks like someone's been digging into your coverage history. For the first time, a flicker of panic crossed the host's face. He knew what that meant. Melania had moved to phase 2. At Mar-a-Lago, she watched with icy satisfaction as the dominoes continued to fall. She had ordered her team to pull every biased, misleading, and outright false report that this host had ever aired about Donald Trump. They had found plenty. Stories based on anonymous sources that were later debunked. Accusations that never led to anything but still damaged Trump's reputation. Blatant misquotes and distortions. And now, it was all being thrown back at him. One by one, major conservative outlets, and even some neutral ones, were running. Stories questioning the credibility of the host himself. Melania turned to her aide. Make sure this keeps spreading. The aide smirked. It's already viral. Back in the studio, the host was sweating now. He tried to move forward, but he could feel the energy in the room shifting further against him. His guest, once so confident, now looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The host tried to brush it off with a nervous laugh. All right, folks. Looks like we've got some unexpected headlines tonight, but let's focus on... A loud boo erupted from part of the audience. It was small at first, but it grew. And then someone yelled, "Why should we believe you?" The host's eyes darted toward the direction of the voice. A woman in the audience stood up, holding up her phone. You've been caught lying about Trump before. Why should we believe you now? Another person stood up. Yeah, you promised a big expose, and now your guest is the one exposed. The host raised his hands, trying to regain control. Let's keep this civil, all right? We're just here to present the facts. A man in the crowd scoffed. Facts? You just got caught making things up. The host had lost them. The very crowd that had come in ready to cheer his takedown of Trump was now turning against him. Melania leaned back on the couch, watching it all unfold. She had seen it before. The arrogance of these media figures, their confidence in their own invincibility. But they weren't invincible. She had just proven it. The host's producers, desperate to salvage the show, abruptly cut to a commercial. Break. Melania smirked. Too late. The damage was done. The headlines wouldn't be about Trump's scandal anymore. They'd be about the spectacular downfall of the liberal host who thought he could take him down. Melania took a deep breath. and set her phone down. She had won, and she wasn't finished yet. As the commercial break dragged on, chaos erupted behind the scenes of the show. The producers huddled together, whispering frantically, while the host wiped the sweat from his forehead. His guest sat stiffly, his hands clenched into fists. He had come expecting to take down Trump. Now he was the one under fire. The studio staff tried to calm the situation, but the damage was already done. Online, the backlash was relentless. The show's social media pages were flooded with comments, mocking the host. Conservative voices seized the moment, flooding the internet with memes and clips of the audience turning against him. And in the midst of it all, Melania Trump watched with a satisfied gaze. Her phone buzzed. Another update. The aide beside her leaned in. The network is considering pulling the segment from their official platforms. They don't want more attention on it. Melania tilted her head slightly, considering. That was good. It meant they knew they had lost control of the narrative, but she wasn't going to let them bury it quietly. No, she said smoothly. Make sure the footage spreads. They wanted to humiliate my husband. Now the world will see them humiliate themselves. The aide nodded, already making calls. Within minutes, conservative influencers, news networks, and political analysts were sharing the clips. Liberal host destroyed trended worldwide. And inside the studio, the host knew he had lost. When the commercial break ended, he forced a smile and tried to move on. Well, folks, that was unexpected, he said, his voice shaking slightly. Let's get back to the discussion. But the audience wasn't having it. They were still murmuring, scrolling through their phones. The energy had shifted permanently. His guest, once eager to talk, now looked humiliated. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I think we should wrap this up. The host's jaw tightened. Come on, we haven't even... I've said what I needed to say, the guest interrupted, his voice tense. But clearly this has become something else. With that, he unhooked his mic, stood up, and walked off the stage. The audience gasped. Some laughed. The host clenched, his fists. He had lost control of his own show. Back at Mar-a-Lago, Melania's phone buzzed again. A new message popped up. Trump wants to see you. He heard what happened. He's pleased. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. They had come for Trump, but she had turned the tables, and in the world of politics and media, that was the only game that mattered. Melania set down her phone and took a deep breath, allowing the moment to sink in. She had done what many had failed to do. She had flipped the script on the mainstream media in real time. The host had walked into the night expecting to humiliate Donald Trump. Instead, his own credibility had been shredded, his guest had fled the stage, and his audience had turned against him. But this was only the beginning. Melania stood and adjusted the sleek cuffs of her white blazer. There was still work to be done. She turned to her aide, who had been tracking the fallout online. What's next? She asked coolly. The aide scrolled through the latest updates. Multiple outlets are picking up the story now. Conservative media is running with it, and even some neutral sources are questioning the host's credibility. His network is in damage control mode, trying to downplay the whole thing. Melania's lips curled slightly. Not enough! She knew how the media worked. The moment the initial outrage faded, they would try to rewrite history, to act as if none of this had ever happened. That wasn't going to happen on her watch. She tapped her phone and dialed a trusted contact, a major figure in conservative media. The call was answered almost immediately. I assume you saw what happened, she said smoothly. A deep chuckle came from the other end. Oh, we saw it. The host got exactly what he deserved. Good, Melania said. I want this to stay in the news cycle. Make sure everyone sees what happens when they come after my husband with lies. The voice on the other end was eager. Consider it done. Melania ended the call and glanced back at the television screen where the host was awkwardly wrapping up his now disastrous show. His once proud smirk had been replaced with a forced smile. He looked rattled, his confidence shattered. Perfect. Her phone buzzed again, another message from an aide. "Trump is waiting for you in his office." Melania took one last glance at the screen before turning on her heel and walking toward her husband's office. When she stepped inside, Donald Trump was leaning back in his chair, a broad grin on his face. He had clearly been watching the disaster unfold in real time. "You really did a number on them," he said, chuckling. "I haven't seen the media fall apart like that in a long time." Melania allowed herself a small smile. "They thought they could embarrass you. Instead, they embarrassed themselves." Trump leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "This is why they're afraid of us. They know we won't just sit back and take it." Melania nodded. "And they'll try again. They always do." Trump smirked. "Let them. They'll lose every time." Melania knew he was right. The media had been after them for years, and they had survived every attack. This was just another battle in a long war. But tonight, they had won. And as Melania walked out of the office, she knew one thing for certain: anyone who tried to take them down next time would think twice before crossing her again.